and I will hit, oh, thanks, Zainab. I'll actually go to my notes. So welcome everyone. We're gonna get started. First, I want to thank you so much. I know there's a lot going on. We're coming to you virtually because we want to reschedule this meeting as soon as possible for as many people as possible. And team members are calling all over the country. Today is just the start of the conversation. So we really look forward to engaging you in person in the weeks to come. As I mentioned, my name is Anna Busak, and I work to engage Long Island and Queens communities. And I'm co-hosting today with my colleague, Harrison Foyer, New York Director of Public Affairs. Harrison, do you want to introduce yourself?
Had to find the unmute button, but it's very good to meet everyone again. And many of you we've spoken with before, so it's good to join you again. I'm Harrison Foyer, and I work with Anna for Equinor as the New York Director of Public Affairs. So great. Anna, why don't you take us through the beginning, and very good to be with everyone tonight.
Great. Now I will just take us through some housekeeping. So if you need Spanish language translation, it is available. Click the interpretation button at the bottom of your Zoom window. It's also available in the web browser version. We have Francisco translating for us tonight. So thank you, Francisco. We ask you to please stay muted to reduce background noise and generally provide a better experience for everyone. The mute button is at the bottom left of the Zoom window. If you'd like to speak, please raise your hand, and we'll be using this in the breakout rooms, particularly in the second half of the workshop. Please keep in mind, this is an interactive workshop. We want to hear from you. We want to hear what questions you have. So please pipe up. If you have questions during the presentation section of the workshop, please type them in the chat. Our colleague, Danielle Higman, will be here kind of monitoring the chat and helping us field questions. We have plenty of time to cover questions in the breakout rooms. We'll also have a 15-minute Q&A after the presentation section. Note, we're recording the presentation section, so not the breakout groups. So if you don't feel comfortable being on video, feel free to turn off your video. We're recording, as I mentioned, for folks that couldn't join today, give them an opportunity to learn about the project. Our goal is to not keep track of who said what, but instead what is being said and why it matters to you. And before I get to our community agreement, I wanted to hand it over to Mayor McGinty, our distinguished participant today. So Mayor McGinty, can I hand it over to you to introduce us?
Thank you. Thank you, Anna. As the mayor of the Village of Island Park, I want to say a special thank you to Equinor for hosting this event tonight. I want to welcome everybody to this event as we focus on a very important discussion within the Village of Island Park. Lord knows we know all too well the impacts of storms like Sandy, and in fact, some of us may still be recovering. This project is part of a multitude of solutions we need to ensure that we're resilient and sustainable, and it will have concrete benefits to the local community economically and environmentally. As we discuss issues like the challenges the village faces related to the life settlement of the Barrett Power Plant, this project is an important part of the solution. It's not the only solution, but it's an important part of that solution. That's why it's so important that Equinor is coming to us early on to allow input from the village in the beginning stages of their projects. They're here because they want to engage and listen to us. Equinor is early on in the process of scoping out overall benefits to property taxes and community benefits, and Equinor is eager to work with us. I can tell you they understand that the property tax issue by the Barrett Power Plant, the impact of the life of settlement, they understand the need for that supply and demand curve. They know where it's got to intersect, and they understand the importance and relevance of their position here in the community. They're eager to work with us. We hope it's the start of a conversation that will continue. So thank you to everybody for being here, and I look forward to one of many engaging conversations to come.
Thank you so much, Mayor McGinty.
Thank you again. I'll turn it back to Anna.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you.
We really appreciate those words. And before we go into the agenda, I just wanted to share our community agreement for how we show up in this space today. So just remember to allow space for everyone to chime in. If you talk a lot, challenge yourself to sit back a little bit. If you are really shy, challenge yourself to ask a question. Be respectful of others' opinions. We'll have one speaker at a time, since we're all on Zoom and can only listen to one person at a time. And as I said, please ask questions and contribute where we really want to hear from you. So I'm going to hand it over. Actually, no, never mind. I'm going to introduce the agenda. So today we'll have a 30-minute presentation, and then we'll have a 15-minute Q&A. And then we'll have a 40-minute breakout session where you can learn more about the various topics that we had. You give us some insight of which one you care about the most in the registration. And we have subject matter experts working directly on the project in those breakout rooms. So we'll introduce Equinor. We'll also introduce our partners here, co-hosts Citizens Campaign for the Environment, and Worm Works Long Island. We'll discuss what we've heard so far. We'll give you a little project overview, a little insight in the permit process, and go into the breakout sessions. So I'll hand it over to Harrison.
All righty. Thank you so much for that housekeeping, Anna. And thank you again so much to Mayor McGinty for that warm welcome. And with that, I'm going to kick us off to our program. So once again, good evening, everyone. Thank you all for the opportunity to present today. As Anna mentioned, I'm the New York Director of Public Affairs for Equinor. But I'm also born and raised here on Long Island. I'm a Nassau County native and I still live here. So just a bit about Equinor as we begin. Equinor is a broad energy company. Our headquarters are in Norway. We have over 20,000 employees worldwide. We've been in the United States since the 80s, and we have offices in Stamford, Boston, Houston, Washington, D.C. And we're so excited to announce that we have a new office in New York and Brooklyn that we just opened up this week. Let's go to the next slide, please. So this is the robust team that we have on hand tonight from the various disciplines within our project. We want to provide substantive answers to your thoughtful questions, and these folks are on our call. They're going to be part of the discussion tonight. Let's go to the next slide. So a bit about the broader picture of Equinor's role in the energy transition. So we have clear ambitions to be a leader in the energy transition, and we have more than a decade of experience in offshore wind. We partnered with other leading companies in the energy transition around the globe, and this map gives a good view of the scale of our commitment in the US, as well as our global aspirations. So we want to zoom in a little bit on what we're doing in New York. So Equinor is honored to have been chosen by New York to supply clean and local offshore wind energy to the largest population center on the East Coast. And the Empire and Beacon Wind projects are a 50-50 joint venture between Equinor and BP, with Equinor as the operator. And as you can see here in red, we're developing two projects for New York: Empire Wind 1 and 2. They're broken into phases, and Beacon Wind 1, which is all the way on the east of Montauk. Together, both of these projects are going to power around 2 million homes. Today's presentation is going to focus on Empire Wind, and specifically on Empire Wind 2. Also want to mention that as part of our commitment to the region, Equinor will also invest in workforce and economic development initiatives, as well as supporting regional environmental monitoring and research. And I should note that we are still very early in setting the process for identifying and managing these investments. We look forward to engaging the public more as they take shape in the coming months in events just like this. Let's go to the next slide, please. So with that, I want to introduce our next speaker, who truly needs no introduction, Adrian Esposito, the Executive Director of Citizens Campaign for the Environment and a leader of WindWorks Long Island. So with that, let's turn it over to Adrian.
Good evening, everyone, and thanks for joining our program here to talk more about offshore wind power and give you some facts and some science and answer some of your questions. It's very new to America, and that means that people, will have questions about it, and rightfully so. But I want to answer the question we get most, which is, why are we doing this? Why are we making a transition from fossil fuels to renewable energy, such as wind? As the mayor said, it's not the only answer to transitioning our power, but it is one of the key answers in that transition. You may or may not know, but back in 2019, New York passed a hallmark law a groundbreaking law, the Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act. And it's a law that actually mandates that 70% of our energy needs comes from renewable resources by the year 2030. That's only 8 or 7.5 years away. So we have a lot of work to do. We're supposed to be carbon free by the year 2040. So you can see all the stats there, but the bottom line is the transition is on, and offshore wind needs to be part of that transition. Next slide. So I want to make this point, which I think is very significant. Offshore wind is new to America, but it's not new around the globe. You can see from this slide, Europe is already generating we're going to round up, 25,000 megawatts of power from offshore wind. I've seen them in Spain. We've seen them in Denmark. We've seen them literally off the coast of many European countries. In fact, Denmark is now generating between 20 and 25% of all its electricity needs just from offshore wind. So Europe has got it going. It's been going in Europe for over 2 decades. It's not just Europe. Next slide. It's China too. China, is not really known for their, cutting edge environmental protection policies. But they are also right now generating 10,000 megawatts of power from offshore wind. So don't go to the next slide yet. So you got Europe at 25,000 megawatts, China at 10,000 megawatts. If anybody wants to go in the chat and take a guess, what is America at in megawatts for offshore wind? Anybody wants to take a guess? I'm going to give you 10 seconds to do so. And I will tell you, America is behind the curve. We're behind the wind curve. I'll just tell you. What's the next slide? There we are. We're right up there with 42 megawatts of offshore wind power in America. So you can see that little wind farm there. We do have a very small one off of Rhode Island. And it's 5 turbines. Each of them are 6 megawatts. So it's 30 megawatts of power there. And somebody's asking, what's the relationship between CC and Equinor? We don't really have a relationship. We're an independent, and I should have said that, so thank you for asking. We're an independent nonprofit environmental group that's been working to transition, working to fight climate change for the last 25 years. And we worked on the bill that the state passed to mandate that we start transitioning from fossil fuels to renewable energy. So we were a big lobbying and advocacy component for that climate change bill in 2019. But anyway, this offshore wind power here off of Rhode Island, is this very small one. And that's really the only real wind farm we have in America right now. So all of this is to say, again, it's not new technology, it's new to America. And lastly, I just want to say there's a WindWorks Long Island Coalition. If anybody wants to be on this listserv, kindly, I'll put my email in the chat in just a minute. Send me your email. We're working with all sorts of environmental organizations. We're working with unions. We're working with businesses. We're working with faith-based organizations. We're working with just a wide variety, small businesses, Chamber of Commerce's, wide variety of groups that want to see this this change happen. So I'm going to turn it back over to Equinor, and as we go along, there'll be more questions, I'm sure. But thank you very much.
Thank you, Adrian. And I think Harrison, I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you again. And thank you again, Adrian. So I don't need to tell everyone here that Long Island has its place in history for having long been a place of innovation, for having been on the cutting edge of science and industry, from our role in helping mankind land on the moon to our industry's growth and building us out as America's first suburb. And, we've been saying Long Island's spirit for innovation is matched only by our passion to protect the environment and the need to preserve our way of life out here. We're surrounded by coastline. We're also well aware, as the mayor said before, of the impacts of a violent climate. And we've seen that from Sandy to Ida. And we're also seeing these impacts much more frequently, but we're also adapting. We're raising our homes. We're installing solar panels and generators. We're organizing beach cleanups. We're conserving wetlands and dune systems and so much more. We need all the solutions on the table to deal with the challenges ahead of us. And as we said before, offshore wind is one of the multitude of solutions we need. So let's go to the next slide, please. So let's just talk, and we're going to go back to Anna shortly, and then we'll continue with the program. We know our industry has an obligation to put more into the community than just the power that we're putting into the grid. And our values drive our community-based development model and inform our commitments for how we work with local communities. And our values are that we're open, courageous, collaborative, and caring. We've been saying over and over that how we deliver our projects is just important as what we deliver. So that's something that's very important to us as we go out to meetings like this. And these are the values we hold in pushing forward with our community-based development model and being with you for events just like today. Let's go to the next slide, please. Now, a lot of folks might be asking why offshore wind? And the simple answer is that wind blows stronger and more consistently offshore than it does over land. And the New York Bight, the area between New York and New Jersey, has some of the world's best offshore wind resources. And importantly, offshore wind provides energy where and when we need it. It's close to populated areas, and wind blows strongest during times of peak energy use in the morning when we're getting ready for work and in the evening when we're coming home. The turbines capture strong ocean winds and they convert it into clean, zero emissions electricity, which is carried through a series of cables to an offshore substation, then to a substation on land where it's then distributed into the grid. Let's go to the next slide, please. So that's all a very broad overview of us. And with that, I want to turn it back over to Equinor to discuss our previous engagement with the community and how we're going to move forward from here.
Thank you, Harrison. So we met some of you a few weeks ago, and we've also been meeting with local leaders to get an understanding of what Island Park cares about. We understand the village is facing a very difficult moment with the Barrett reassessment and the LIPA settlement. And we understand that this is all context for the community and that our project is entering, and there are many concerns. This is why it's so important to set expectations. As Mayor McGinty said, this is part of the solution, but not the solution. So in the months to come, our project will be part of the overall solution that the leadership of the Village of Island Park will ultimately take the lead on putting together. So this is all to say that our project is not a silver bullet, but we understand how important community benefits are to the village. Today is one of many conversations we'll have in the months to come. Once we've outlined the proposed preferred route through the state permitting process, which is known as the Article 7, we'll be able to have a constructive conversation with the village leadership and the greater community on what those community benefits look like. We're here today because we want to hear from you. We want to know what your priorities are, how you want to be involved. We have the space for input in our breakout sessions, and we encourage you to use it. We'll review these comments one by one and make sure to address them and incorporate them. We understand energy costs are very top of mind. That is especially the case right now. We have all seen our energy costs skyrocket, pointing to the fact that energy independence is important because we all want predictability. To that end, we're bringing renewable energy that will not only offset the impacts of fossil fuels, but will be cheaper to develop and more predictable in the long term. We're also building an industry with shared benefits across economic development, environment, and health, as you see in this slide. Across our New York projects, NYSERDA estimates an increase of less than $2 on your monthly power bills, and these costs are shared across the state. NYSERDA has selected proposals for contract negotiation through a rigorous and competitive process according to price of the project and cost of energy, with 70% weighted towards project cost of energy, as well as economic benefit and project viability. And a lot of the reason that Empire Wind was selected was to provide energy to New York State was because it was more cost effective than the alternatives. We're also hoping to ensure that New York becomes the manufacturing hub for the entire offshore wind industry in the US and capturing the development potential for this industry locally in New York. Equinor is constructing new offshore wind manufacturing hubs at the Port of Albany and South Brooklyn Marine Terminal. Both ports will employ hundreds of New Yorkers to assemble components for wind projects up and down the coast. We are building a workforce of the future to support this growing industry and working with local partners. I'll now go a little bit on the project overview and some specifics on the project on Empire Wind. So the project is located approximately 15 to 30 miles off the south shore of Long Island. We have space for up to 174 wind turbines, 2 offshore substations for a total max of 176 foundations. This number is likely to be much lower. up to 260 nautical miles of inter-array cables, the cables between the turbines, up to 66 nautical miles of submarine export cables, the cables going from the farm to the land. And this is the maximum design envelope we outlined in our construction operations plan, which is all available on the BOEM website. And our impact is likely to be much smaller. For example, Empire Wind has contracted a company, Vestas, to provide 138 50-megawatt turbines for the project. So we know birds are critically important to Long Islanders. So I wanted to just focus in on some key points around birds. I'll note that National Audubon supports offshore wind energy and transmission that is sited and operated properly to avoid, minimize, and mitigate effectively bird impacts to birds, other wildlife, and places they need. Climate change is a bird issue and the #1 threat to birds and their habitat. You can read more about it in National Audubon Survival by Degrees. The report estimates the range loss for 389 species of birds if we do not address climate change. So our subject matter experts will be available to answer questions in the breakout rooms. And here is a little bit of a high level overview, but more details will be available in the breakout sessions. This is a simulation of what you will be able to see from shore at Ocean Beach and Long Beach. Visibility from shore will be dependent on weather conditions and time of day. The container ships will be in front of the turbines, so you'll be seeing those sail along as you have over the past decades. And you can watch a video simulation of what the turbines look like online from other vantage points. I'll add the link in the chat a little bit later on. You can also have access to the visual impact assessment and the construction operations plan, which is available on the BOEM website, as I mentioned. So now let's go and discuss the potential route. It's still being iterated and feedback from stakeholders and based on engineering and survey data. As I mentioned, this preferred route and alternatives will be outlined in our state permit. We anticipate there'll be many questions in the months to come about the right-of-way as well as on construction. Please know this is just the beginning of the process and we'll continue to engage with Island Park on the route. The proposed route will have underwater export cables from the Empire Wind 2 project that will make landfall in Long Beach and or Lido Beach. There are a number of sites under consideration for the cable landing. Up to 2 will be needed. Similarly, multiple onshore cable routes are under consideration, but at most 2 will be used. Onshore transmission cables will run through Long Beach and Island Park to a point of interconnection in Oceanside, also known as a POI. All cables will be buried underground, and we're looking at direct pipe and horizontal directional drilling, also known as HDD, to avoid and minimize impacts to the beaches and boardwalk. 1 onshore substation will be built. Our preferred location is in the village of Island Park at POPS, although 2 other sites were also evaluated as possible locations. We will outline our preferred route in depth in the Article 7 process with New York State, and we encourage you to follow the process and get involved. Once we file a case number, will be assigned, and you can follow the process at www.dps.ny.gov. So a little bit more on HDD, and our subject matter experts are on hand to answer additional questions. Empire Wind is evaluating direct pipe and HDD, as I mentioned, at landfall to avoid and minimize impacts to the beach, dunes, and boardwalk. At the top, you can see an example of what it looks like. It effectively allows tunneling underneath important areas, whether important for tourism, for business, or the environment. These techniques represent some of the best practices proposed by the project. For the substation, we're early in the design process, and I want to reiterate, we're early on in the design process. We know that aesthetics and access to waterfront are important for the village. We've heard that. We look forward to engaging the community on the design in the months to come. Here you see a few examples of what substations look like. The top is a rendering for Empire Wind 1 for the substation in Sunset Park, Brooklyn. And the bottom is another example from a previous Equinor project in the UK. The village of Island Park is already familiar with substations like the Long Island Railroad substation by the train station. So I just wanted to see you have an example of a substation in your community. So that's a quick summary and update for the project. So now we'll get into how a little bit on the timeline and how you can get involved. So it's a long road before we begin construction and fabrication. There is a rigorous federal as well as state permitting process to develop the most environmentally and socially responsible project. Our project has met federal, state, and local, has to meet state, federal, and local regulations like the Coastal Zone Management Plan, the Marine Mammals Protection Act, the Migratory Bird Treaties Act, NEPA, and the Magnuson-Stevens Act that governs marine fisheries and management. We're also consulting with state historical preservation offices and representatives of federally recognized Native American tribes. BOEM, or the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management, oversees the federal regulatory process, and last summer published a notice of intent to prepare an environmental impact statement for the project. The notice of intent informs the public of the upcoming environmental analysis and describes how the public can become involved in the preparation. Some of you might have given comments in the BOEM process this past summer for Empire Wind, and we thank you for that. So right now the project is gearing up to submit our Article 7 filing for Empire Wind 2. I'll just give you a little bit of an overview of what that is. Enacted in 1970, Article 7 establishes a review process for major transmission infrastructure. The process is overseen by the New York Public Service Commission, or PSC, an appointed board in the New York State government and located within the Department of Public Service. The department regulates utilities in the state and stimulates renewable energy resources for the benefit of consumers and employers. Article 7 evaluates the purpose, need, and environmental impacts of transmission facilities, allowing the public to comment on proposed plans. It also articulates in detail the proposed right-of-way within New York State. Equinor filed our Article 7 application for Empire Wind 1, which connects into Brooklyn, in June 2021, and conducted an extensive public engagement process throughout the last summer. And now we're preparing to file our Article 7 application for Empire Wind 2. And there are opportunities for you to get involved. In the Gear Up, we will publish a website where you can comment on the project, publish notices in local papers. You might have already seen them. They will be published this week. And inform landowners about proposed route. You can find out more about the project on the DPS website, which we'll also share with you in the chat. So before we go into the breakout sessions, we plan to continue to host meetings virtually and in person in the coming months for the Empire Wind project, as well as for our Beacon Wind project. So please sign up for our updates at empirewind.com and follow us at Twitter at Equinor Wind US. You can also connect via our hotline, which number is here, and email us at empirewind@equinor.com. I'll leave it there. And Harrison, can you take us into the next section?
Sure. So let's talk about what it's going to look like as we go into the breakout sessions, because now is when we get to hear from you, and we're going to transition into the group discussion. So let's just go to the next slide and we'll talk about how it works. So we're going to be split into smaller breakout rooms, and we hope you click accept when you're prompted. There's a number of different topics that you've selected to be a part of tonight. You'll be given 2 discussion prompts, 20 minutes for each. So we'll want to know what questions you have about the information we just presented, and then what questions you have for our subject matter experts in the room with the topic that you chose. And if you'd like to switch to another topic, you could return to the main room and somebody from our team will place you. So let's just go to the next slide, because I want to do a quick recap on the community agreement we made right at the beginning of our presentation. We want to make sure that everyone allows space for everyone in the meeting to chime in. We want to be respectful of others' opinions, one speaker at a time, but we overall want you to ask questions and contribute. We're here to hear from you. So with that, I think it's time to go into the breakout rooms.